welcome to this evening's Premier League tonight. The good news is that Rio and Frank are still with us, but Steve McManaman's joined us for the next hour. Hey, that's as good as my jokes get. If you want to join in the conversation, just use the hashtag PL tonight. There's so much to talk about. We're going to talk about the constant war on racism that exists in football and in society. We're going to be talking about players' salaries. Are they too much? Are they too little? We're also going to be discussing brilliant players for your football club who became unfulfilled potential. There's loads to discuss. As I say, if you want to join the conversation, hashtag PL tonight. But we're going to start by just reflecting on this game here, and we'll hear from Alex and Lee before we wrap up our conversation about City and Newcastle.
Hello, Alex here, joined by Ruby making her BT Sport debut.
Feeling pretty good,
Yeah, we're feeling good. Manchester City winning 3-1. It was a bit touch and go to start with, a little bit sketchy, a little bit frustrating. But you know what, Sergio Aguero turning on, man of the match performance from him. 3 goals, you can't argue, and showing everyone why he's the man at this club. And Leroy Sané, oh, tell me about Leroy Sané.
In 3 years' time, Leroy Sané is going to be talked about as one of the best players in the league.
We'll move on. At least we don't play them again, you know what I mean? So, you know, Newcastle don't have a league game for quite a while now, and we're going to probably look at, hopefully get a body through the door. We know that Rafa Benitez has known for a while that the takeover is off, and hopefully we get 1 or 2 through the door and to improve this side.
What did you make of... are you just bringing a drink into the studio? Are you bringing a cup of tea?
Leo's just giving me... It was a little bit cold.
Well, OK, you've been on the gantry for the last couple of hours, so I'll give you that. Your thoughts on the City performance today?
I thought it was OK. I wouldn't have gone overboard on them because it was that type of game. I thought they were a little bit sloppy at times, but it was just far too easy. I think when it is really, really easy and you've got that much possession, you always felt that they could step it up a gear if they wanted to. You know, if it got a little bit close, they could just run away down the field and score another goal, which happened. I just thought it was a really easy game for them. I thought it was quite boring, to be very honest.
That's sold it. Well done.
No, just because they were so dominant. At no stage did you ever think they were going to lose the game or draw the game. You always just thought that they'd win, and 80-odd% possession, as you said before. I think says it all. I think it was nice.
That is tea you're drinking, is it? That's
Scotch.
That's like it. Newcastle, give us your thoughts on this situation, because Rio points out Mike Ashley's sort of £250 million into that club, but we believe the offer on the table from the Amanda Staveley consortium is of that kind of number. It seems Mike Ashley wants a bit more. He's saying it's a waste of time. She's saying the offer is still on the table. And the poor Newcastle fans, who again were hearing their numbers, they were hearing good voice. They do what they always do, home and away.
Just left in limbo, really, aren't they?
Left in limbo. Something has to happen here. And with 11 days left of the transfer window, it's again the worst possible timing for all this to be going on, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You feel very sorry for them. Listening to the lads before, I totally agree. They're a great club. They're a great set of fans. And they're neither here nor there. You know that Mike Ashley's not going to spend a lot of money in the transfer window. Every player now is costing double what they did at the beginning of the season. Rafa wants players. He needs a certain quality of type of player with a certain amount of quality, which is going to take a lot of expense. It's it doesn't look as if the takeover's going to happen, because normally if takeovers do happen, they're done nice and quick, aren't they? This has been a really protracted, long running saga which hasn't done, and the closer it gets to the end of the season, and if Newcastle languishing near the bottom of the league, the takeover won't happen just in case they go down. Are they waiting for the new TV deal? Are they waiting for Newcastle to get relegated or stay in the league? There's loads and loads of ifs and buts, and it looks as if it's going to keep on dragging out to the end of the season, which is a pity for the poor fans.
Absolutely. OK, well, let's move on with the show then. Let's take a look at the headlines from today, because it was once again a cracking day in the Premier League. Gone in 780 seconds. Arsenal were 3 goals up in a very short amount of time in that game against Crystal Palace, blowing Crystal Palace away. It's a difficult day for them today. Eden Cole's goals, you like that?
Amazing.
Yeah. I bet you liked it. Chelsea winning again.
He was fantastic.
He was brilliant, wasn't he? He was brilliant today. He played fantastically. Chelsea back to winning ways. They needed that. And I think we've excelled ourselves there, silenced by the Lamb. Paul Lambert doing the business, winning his first game in charge against Stoke City, much to Robbie Savage's delight, I'm sure. So congratulations to Paul Lambert. But there was a nasty moment in today's football, and all of us here at BT Sport, we all send James McCarthy our very, very, very best wishes. It was a horrible incident, actually, that left Solomon Rondon in floods of tears. There's absolutely no way that he's implicated in doing this on purpose. He went to shoot. James McCarthy put his foot in the way of the ball, and he sadly got a compound fracture, actually, of the tibia and the fibia. Look, the medical advances are at a point now where many years ago, David Boos, for example, you had an injury like this and it was hard to come back. But from Eduardo to Aaron Ramsey, Oviedo, you know, even to Seamus Coleman, who went down and comforted his teammate today after that injury. You know, it's the sort of thing that, yes, you're 8 or 9 months out, but the message is you come back and...
Let's hope so. We don't know how, well, we know it's very bad. We don't know exactly in terms of the length of the recovery, but the hardest thing is mentally. We've all been there. Never to that degree, I don't think any of us, but I've been off for 3 or 4 months, and it was so hard for me to accept.
What's hard?
You're not with your mates. You end up being slightly outcast in the medical room while they go out to train. You can't play in games, which we all want to do. You feel like you're not really contributing anything, and then you've got your own problems of trying to get right. And sometimes there is no light at the end of the tunnel in your own head. There will be for him, we hope, and he'll get the best treatment, work hard, and hopefully he's back.
We've spoken in the past, haven't we, about when you had your back injury at United and you were kind of in and out of the team, but you weren't as involved as previously, and you hated it.
Yeah, you just don't feel part of the makeup of the club during that period of time, and it's mentally, as Frank just mentioned there, is so difficult to deal with at times, and you just need that support around the training ground at home. And the problem is that all your teammates will start to say, because he was an integral member of that team, is when you're back. When you're back, and they think they're helping and being friendly, but sometimes you sit, that's the worst thing you want to hear, because that's pressure. When you're back, you've got to give them a date. And the date starts coming closer and closer. You might have setbacks. There could be infection. There could be just general setbacks that happen and are normal with injuries. And then they'll ask you again, a bit of a delay now. It's embarrassing. Your pride takes a bit of a knock. So it's a long, dark road coming back, but he will see light at the end of the tunnel at some point, and I'm sure that'll be the incentive that he needs to keep pushing on in the right direction.
And the key thing now for the medical advances, you know, he will probably be at hospital already. They'll be operating. You will not get better treatment than the treatment that he's now going to get.
Premier League level now, it's exceptional, isn't it? You know, you've got access to physios every single day. It'd be 2 or 3 times a day having treatments when he's, you know, when he can, of course. He's got teammates around him who've been through that situation, as you rightly said, Seamus Coleman. So. Let's hope he's back, because it was an accident, and sometimes the worst injuries are caused by accidental clashes like that, isn't it? And it didn't look very well at all.
And there was a message actually from Solomon Rondon. He said, "I'm absolutely devastated. Rivalries are forgotten when a colleague suffers such an unlucky injury," which it was unlucky. Really hope to get you back playing again soon. Jay McCarthy, 16. Hashtag get well soon, James. Well, let's get some reaction now from an Everton fan and also from Sam Allardyce on the game.
Obviously, have to send our thoughts and best wishes to James McCarthy. Horrific injury in a goal-saving tackle to stop Rondon from scoring a goal. It was a really, really horrible break as well. So our best wishes to him.
Double fracture, tib and fib. Yeah, I've no idea, but obviously we'll do it as quick as we possibly can. I think that that very much depends on the specialist or the surgeon that assesses him as soon as can. But tib and fibs been broken, and because of his really brave efforts to stop West Brom with a possible scoring opportunity, so he's paid a heavy price for his commitment there, and I think that you know, that's obviously a big blow for him.
Well, there's loads of messages on social media for James. Ellis says, devastating to see James McCarthy injured again. A double leg break is just so unlucky, and he worked so hard today. Thoughts of everyone are with you. Tony says, respect to Rondon for coming over to offer his sympathies to McCarthy. A class act, despite the unfortunate circumstances. And Gillen says, good luck to James McCarthy. Hopefully it's a speedy recovery. It was interesting, actually, wasn't it, Rondon's reaction? You realise that even in the heat of battle out there on a football field, as he says in his social media message, he calls him a colleague. You know, you're all very much pulling in the same direction when something like that happens.
Yeah, you just never want to see a fellow player injured. Yeah. And especially when you're part of the situation, especially the unfortunateness that surrounds it in terms of him just being there. It's an innocent tackle. He's gone there to stop a scoring opportunity, as Sam Allardyce said there. And it's just unfortunate, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about situations like that. And we saw the pictures coming through immediately when it happened, and he looked so distressed, Rondon, and it's a shame really that someone else has to be part of that type of injury.
Okay, let's talk about another result today then. Chelsea won a game of football, and not on penalties.
Scored 4 goals, played very well. Brighton had a few opportunities. When you score two goals, Hazard, as I tend to keep saying, but when he's on form, he's the difference. Chelsea are obviously a very good team, but he's the magic, and he was unbelievable. The link-up actually between him and Willian, it's been a talking point of last season, having 2 of those advanced midfield players together. Hasn't been happening for Chelsea so much. Today they were both together, and going forward they were so dangerous.
What do you all make of Chelsea's pursuit of a so-called target man, whether it is Peter Crouch, whether it's Andy Carroll from West Ham? This is a kind of era where we talk about football in such scientific terms, and now suddenly Chelsea just after a target man, a big man up front to knock the ball long to. What do you all make of that?
Well, like the two players that have been mentioned, Andy Carroll, I believe he's just got injured as well,
yeah.
And Peter Crouch. Peter Crouch has been a great player over the years, but coming to the end of his career, but Chelsea have had Tammy Abrahams in their ranks, who's a tall, rangy player. You'd put him on the side of being a target man. So maybe he fits that bill. Why is he being brought back from loan to be part of that? And I think that's the frustrating thing when I think for Chelsea fans, that they see talent coming out of the youth system, being loaned out, and then going out and buying other players. You see Batshuayi up front there. Is he better than Solanke, which they had, potentially? Tammy Abrahams? I mean, if these guys are given the opportunity to play and the platform to play in a Chelsea shirt, could they do more than what Batshuayi is doing, who they went out and paid, late 20s, early 30s for?
30-odd million.
That's a good point. I mean, what sort of message does it send to the Chelsea Academy, to those youth players looking on?
Well, not great. I agree with what Rio's saying. I think there are players that are on loan. There are players maybe who have been on the bench recently that could do it. I think it's a very short-term answer, Peter Crouch. And no disrespect to Crouch, he would know that. I don't quite see it for that reason. And Chelsea got to be a bit careful, because we're looking at Manchester City here, spent a fortune, loads of attacking options. Manchester United seemingly going to get Sanchez. Chelsea have to make sure they're not left behind. Listen, they bought Morata. Recently, he's not scoring, so all eyes are on. But I don't think it's knee-jerk reaction time. I think that the big moves going forward will come in the summer now.
I think they need somebody. I think they do need a centre-forward. But as you said, I think these names that are just getting thrown out there at the moment, it's just pie-in-the-sky stuff, isn't it? They need better quality, with all respect to... listen to that.
It feels like someone's getting to the end of the season almost,
exactly, yeah. Yeah.
But does that not make you wonder where Conte's future is at? It's not like a manager who's looking to buy players for next 2 or 3 years, is it?
No, it's frustrating. Listen, clubs will work differently these days. We know that it's more fluent, managers move on a lot, so clubs make decisions with a longer view, maybe not necessarily with that manager always in mind. So who knows? That again, a big summer for Chelsea. They need to consolidate, come in the top 4. You know, they've got maybe a run at the Champions League, make sure they're in the top 4, and then in the summer, make their decision. Do we push on again like other clubs are?
The main thing is keeping all the people like Hazard. That's the one. Yes, they'll have to bring people in, of course they will. But everybody in this league now are vulnerable to different sides, aren't they? Particularly a lot of the foreign players, like Hazard, for instance. They're vulnerable to a Barcelona, to a Real Madrid if they come in. And it's paramount to keep them and keep them happy. Because they are the stars. Just I've seen Chelsea lots of times, and then suddenly they look a different team when Hazard plays.
And aren't you especially vulnerable to those players going, if indeed City are buying the players they are, and if United are getting Sanchez and Mkhitaryan arrives at Arsenal, and Eden Hazard, with no disrespect at all, sees a Peter Crouch or Andy Carroll being linked?
I think the unrest with a manager will filter down to the change rooms. I think if it's not steady at the top of the building, the underneath, the foundations will start to see cracks, and that's what I'm fearful for Chelsea. The sooner they get this man in the picture there on the sides, Conte sorted out, this kind of player will then be committed more to the cause at Chelsea.
I'm not interested about necessarily the type of player they buy, because in the recent years, they bought sort of unfashionable players to the general public. Like Alonso, there was question marks. He's turned into a genius. You know, Zappacosta's come in, and I know he's not playing all the time, but he looks a decent player. And they're not names that would spring out. As long as they do a job for Chelsea, they'll be fine. But it's just there just seems to be this undercurrent where everybody's just expecting if Conte says, right, I'm off at the end of the season, nobody would be surprised at the moment. It's just getting that little bit of solidity in. But, you know, he's done an incredible job, hasn't he? So you can't doubt him or any of the people that he wants to bring in.
Yeah, I think we mustn't forget that. We have 2 short-term memories. Done a brilliant job. Last year was incredible. But this season's proved that when you're fighting on all fronts, which Chelsea weren't last year, you need a bigger squad, more depth in terms of quality.
And he doesn't look like a particularly happy manager, does he, in pre- and post-match interviews?
I think it's pretty obvious that the recruitment in the summer wasn't what he wanted. He won the league with the club. I think he felt in a position of strength, quite rightly so, after what he'd done. Signed a new contract himself without extending it, but a new contract. And I think at that point he was sort of saying, these are the players I want. And obviously some of the picks didn't come off for him. And the frustration has been, you know, boiling under since then. You can see it in his body language and in recent performances.
And it filters down to players or not?
I'd say so, yeah. I think when you win the league, the next season is the next window is vitally important. You need someone to come in and invigorate that dressing room. You need someone to come in who's going to inspire that dressing room for the next season coming. something to lift the levels again, and they haven't done that in this window.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? Because if they, I mean, I know they aren't, but playing devil's advocate, if they finish 5th this year and miss out on the Champions League spot, for instance, because they haven't strengthened, that's when the likes of Hazard, you know, we're talking about Alexis Sanchez leaving because he's not being successful to a certain extent for winning the league and being in the Champions League for Arsenal this year. That can happen at any of these top 6 clubs now. You know, if Tottenham don't get there, they'll be talking about Harry Kane, they'll be talking about Dele Alli. You know, if it's Liverpool, they'll be talking about someone else leaving. If you need to get in the Champions League to please the star players in your team, because they all want to win and they all want to better themselves and they all want to test themselves against the best players in the world. So you have to be there all the time. And you know, after them winning the league, they should have went out and made a big concerted effort to bring in a lot of quality.
Very good. OK, thanks for now. Right, get your 3-word match reports in. We want to hear from you. We want to know which team you support and the 3 words that sum up your team's performance today. After the break, lots of interesting chat to come. We'll see you in a couple of moments. Don't go anywhere.
This programme is sponsored by Bet365.
This evening's Premier League tonight. Lovely to have you with us. Thanks for all your comments. Lots of 3-word match reports coming in. Holly says Sergio Aguero. Frank's impressed. Daniel, wins a win. Man United fan, Burnley 0, Man U 1. That's the key thing. Monreal, top class, says Anshul. And one from Joe here, who's a West Brom fan, just simply says, nice one, Cyril. And across the Premier League today, across the country today, people were remembering Cyril Regis, who very sadly passed away from a heart attack at the age of just 59. There's an important message there. You broke down barriers, and this is just, you know, worth remembering that Cyril was playing football in an era when life was so hard for black players, and it wasn't just about playing football for him. It was about proving that black players could mix it with white players. It was about trying to defy the very clear racism that existed in the stands around the country at that time. And Cyril Regis will quite rightly be remembered for the rest of all time as a fantastic footballer. I mean, I remember a goal he scored against Norwich, which I guess a lot of people have done, but trust me, his goal was very special indeed, and he was a remarkable footballer, a special man. And Dave Turton left us this message. He was a friend of Cyril.
My dad took me up many times to the Hawthorns to watch Cyril play. In my eyes, he was a legend. I was in a very privileged position years later to work as assistant community officer at West Brom and work alongside Cyril when he was reserve team coach. We developed an inner city programme for young people all around the national campaign to kick racism out of football, of which Cyril was a huge advocate. The man was a visionary. He was a legend. And he was the nicest man you would ever wish to meet.
Clear emotion there from Dave, as there was from so many people. And, you know, Cyril is being remembered as a pioneer, but also we shouldn't forget just the most remarkable footballer. He was athletic, he was fast, he struck a ball like hardly anybody else. He was magic to watch and was an inspiration, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and I think the players of today, the players from the different cultures that are coming into this league, they owe him a lot, and the players of his generation, because they took a lot of the brunt of everything for us to be able to go out and play under better circumstances, and the intimidation that he would have been under, the environment that he was playing in was so much more testing for a character, mentally and physically, than it is today. And the shots you saw there as a player, phenomenal player, what a specimen.
And I suppose it's difficult for players, young players now coming into football, and they will hear us talk about the fact that Cyril Regis was a pioneer. Racism, the battle is nowhere near one, but it's almost hard now, isn't it, for players, young players, to understand just what life would have been like for players like Cyril. And he wasn't the only one by any means, was he?
No, I remember my dad played with Clyde Best at West Ham years ago, and he got terrible abuse, and I'm sure it was a really lonely place. Now we're used to it. It's very different. The makeup of dressing rooms are different, all for good, all for the good. And in those days, those lads were probably feeling lonely on their own, taking abuse, not probably getting much support mechanisms. And now there are support mechanisms, hopefully, that they started with people like Cyril Regis, who seemed to me, not knowing him at all, a man of dignity as well. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just got through it by taking the upper hand, the upper calls. He was on the good ground and dealt with it brilliantly.
Okay, so there is progress, but we now have to have a conversation about the fact that there are still incidents and issues all the time. Ryan Brewster, who is a young lad who you've clearly coached, I know that. He's 17 years of age, and he himself has experienced racial abuse just this season.
Yeah, I was there.
At that age, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, it was a team from Russia. It was Spartak Moscow side. But when I went to watch the under-18 game or the under-19 game in the Champions League over in Moscow, the crowds were chanting at one of the Liverpool players. And then at the home game, it was a particular player was given shouted racist abuse at Rian. I think it was about 3 or 4 occasions. But I mean, I think there's a case ongoing and they're investigating it. But whether they'll get anything, because it was just his words against the other player from Spartak Moscow. But it's very disturbing. He was really upset after the game, and trying to get his emotions in check after the game was hard, because really? he was so upset about it and angry that it's still happening in this day and age. And the Liverpool players and the Liverpool staff were disgusted by it all.
And he's not the only one. Tyrone Mings did a few interviews recently, the Bournemouth player, where he said it's not unusual, not even unusual for him to get the N-word mentioned to him on Twitter or on other social media platforms. We're trying to fight this battle. How much better has it become, do you think, Rio, and how much further have we still got to go?
I said a while back that I was caught up in the bubble. I thought, this country, we're doing so great with the racism situation. And then a couple of situations rear their heads, and you realise that it's just been put under the surface, really. It's been put under the table and just left there, really, not dealt with. And I think that the problem is when to situate the awareness, yes, I think we've had great strides with the awareness from different campaigns, and the FA have taken a part in that. But I think it's then the reaction to a case when it arises. I still think we're miles away.
What needs to be better, do you think?
Well, I think the support for individual players. And listen, for instance, Mason Holgate situation with Firmino. I'm not saying Mason Holgate is right or wrong, or Firmino is right or wrong. We'll let the powers that be will decide that. But I think once this case comes out in the open, people that kick it out, show racism, red card, the PFA, they need to be the first ones knocking on these boys' doors for support. Now, I don't believe that's happened directly to these players. Go into them. I've asked a few questions at both the clubs, and these guys haven't had contact from these organisations. So that's where I think that it falls down, because whether you're on the right side of this or the wrong side of this, you need support and help to improve and to rebuild. And that doesn't happen. And we wear T-shirts all of our career, one day a year for Kick It Out. But you're meant to be there when these situations come out and happen. And these are young players. Mason Holgate's a young kid. Rian's is a young kid at Liverpool. They need that support immediately, not after a couple of days. And the problem I have, and we're going to have the guy on the phone in a minute from Kick It Out, is that when this situation happens, a couple of days later, a week later, the FA then go to Mason Holgate and say that they're going to investigate or charge regarding a tweet sent 8 years ago.
When he was 15.
When he was 15 years old. Now, what message does that send out to any kid that feels he's on the wrong end of a racist remark and comes out and speaks? What message does that send to the next kid that happens to? I'm not going to come out and speak, because they're going to dig deep into my past and find something out to assassinate my character. That's the message that's sending out. That's the worrying point for me. Who at the FA decided the timing was right to go ahead and come with an investigation like that at that time with Mason Holgate? That's the worrying factor for me, and that's what makes people then go underground and stay underground when these situations arise.
Well, you mentioned Kick It Out there. Troy Townsend joins us on the phone right now. Troy is the education manager for Kick It Out. Troy, thanks very much for joining us, first of all.
No worries at all. Good evening.
And you. I think we should start really by your reaction to what Rio has just said.
Well, there's quite a lot, to be honest. I mean, where to start in terms of, I agree implicitly about the situation when a young player or any player has been the subject of abuse. And obviously we're talking of racial abuse at this moment in time, and the processes that are in place for young players and the support of anyone, positive and negative in terms of what they've done. I think for clarity, what we need to understand is that Kick It Out is not a sanctioning body. So what we do, we highlight incidents that have happened either on the pitch or in the stands or wherever they may be. We report them to the FA. If the FA choose to investigate, we are not allowed to contact the clubs. We are not allowed to contact the players, and this is in the professional side of the game. We're not allowed to contact anybody until the investigation is complete. So I can understand where, it's deemed that we're not doing anything, but our initial point is to flag up the incidents and to make the governing body aware And then, like I said, they have to investigate it. Particularly in the case of Rhian Brewster, I've spent a lot of time at Liverpool, a lot of time, not only supporting Rhian, but delivering educational workshops right across the board through the academy and work closely with the academy staff. And just like Steve said, I'm well aware that Rhian is a very, very emotional young man, and he's a very emotional young man because he's been the victim of racial abuse 4 times in the last 18 months. Personally, I was worried for him. I was worried that the next one that was going to happen to him, what kind of impact it would have. And unfortunately, he's been the victim again.
Sorry to cut you, Troy, but if you see that that's happening 4 times in 18 months, this kid's under great stress.
Yeah.
How can Kick It Out not be fighting the FA to be able to be that first point of contact as an organisation that says that we are trying to kick racism out of football? How can you not be the people that fight to say we need to be there to support this kid?
We do, Rio. We do. We do implicitly. I mean, a couple of these incidents have happened abroad. So the problem there is that it's under a completely different jurisdiction. And, you know, I don't have to discuss with you guys what we feel about UEFA, but it's a completely different jurisdiction. So, you know, we continue to, all I can tell you is that we continue to challenge and we continue to say that we need to be able to support the players, because I don't think the whole game gets the impact that incidents like that have on players in this day and age.
Rio, would you mind just talking us through, because your family went through an incident that happened on the pitch. It was involving your brother, but you were very involved in it. Just give us an idea of the stress and the pressure it puts on the player's brother, the player's parents, the whole family.
My mum was in hospital. No one was
because of that incident?
Because of the pressure. People coming to the house, windows being smashed, all because of this one incident. And it doesn't just affect the player. He'll have parents, he'll have brothers and sisters, cousins, friends, who will all want to be that protective armour around that one player. But they need support. And that's why it's important that the FA, the PFA, Kick It Out, these organisations fight tooth and nail to be that first port of call for these players, because it isn't just the one player, it's the network around them that is also affected. And the stress it brings to a family, my brother really probably quite never recovered from that.
Really?
So it does have a long-lasting effect on the individual, but again, the people around them.
It's really sad that you can come out and say, you've been victim of racial abuse like that, and then be the victim again when people, I don't know, on social media have a go, stop moaning or whatever, or just because they support another team, or as Rio said, come round to people's houses and smash windows when you're the victim. No wonder people want to keep it quiet, because they must be terrified at times. The stress it puts on your family, just because you've said you are the victim. I think it's absolutely disgusting.
I saw some online reports about players coming out and talking about racial abuse that they'd suffered a few years ago, Troy.
Yeah.
And some of the responses online shocked me. People were coming at them saying, oh, you're coming out and talking about this now to get some money or to get some notoriety. There's still such a long way to go, isn't there, in this fight against racism? And perhaps, we can all talk about this, the rise of the internet. And it used to be people on the terraces, and I'm telling you now, if someone out there made a racist comment, they'd be escorted straight out of the stadium. But that doesn't stop the same person from going home and anonymously sending a message on social media. And it almost feels like that's the new frontier that we all need to be fighting, doesn't it?
The new anonymity is the internet.
It's grown over the last couple of years, and the unfortunate nature is I don't think the social media organisations have really taken it on board, Twitter, Facebook, and all those kind of platforms that could really stamp it out immediately. People talk about freedom of speech and allow people just to say what they've got to say, but, you know as well as I will, these things are harmful, they're hurting. Rio's right, they don't just impact on the individual, there's a bigger picture here, they impact on those that are close, and no one wants to be able to read stuff like that. But we're working with Twitter and we're working with Facebook now quite intensely to try and change that culture on social media as well. And I can only say that things, hopefully, things are changing slowly, but there has to be a collaborative kind of workforce here to make the game a better place, not just obviously to play in, but as a viewing perspective, and also for people that work in it as well.
And I know the social media sites are doing their bit. I think something we're all struggling in the studio to get our heads around, Troy, is that when a player is subjected to an incident of racial abuse, you as a supportive body are unable to contact the player. You can't ring him, you can't give him names and phone numbers of counsellors or other supportive bodies that can help him. You can't put an arm around them. You can't do any of that, no?
Well, that's the unfortunate nature of it at the moment when, you know, there's incidents that are live at the moment and they're with the FA and they're being investigated. So basically what they're saying is if we get involved, we almost kind of compromise the situation. So until the investigation is finalised, we are not allowed to contact the players and we're not allowed to contact the club, even just to talk about their welfare. Whether the PFA do, I'm not even sure that the PFA are allowed to either. So that is something that is set in stone. It's in the rule book. And again, it's something that we're challenging to make change because of the impact that we've seen, obviously, when these incidents happen for players. But it's the nature of what happens at the moment in terms of the rules.
Okay, well, it's certainly something that perhaps needs to be thought about again. Troy, thank you ever so much for your hard work and for joining us on the phone. Thank you. Rio, I feel the last word on this should be with you, really. You've seen the cases, you've been through it yourself as a family, you've heard what Troy has had to say. What needs to be better? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, firstly, I think that rule there is a shambles, really. I think more than anything, these players need the support, like we've mentioned before. And for the FA to say, no, you've got to leave them to their own devices almost. Who is there to support these kids? Who is there to help them after the situation comes out to light and is in the public domain? Because there's so many different elements that can affect them that are going on. How are they going to continue to play football under that stress and that pressure? The clubs can only do so much. These guys, these organisations are meant to be professionals within these situations. They should be allowed to actually go and help these guys. Like I said before, in the Mason Holgate and Firmino situation, I'm not saying they should be going to one and not the other. They should be going to both to help and to try and rebuild.
And I think we forget exactly how young these players are. Mason Holgate's 21 years of age, Rhian Brewster's 17 years of age. You know, we're all parents sitting here. They're children, effectively, aren't they? You know, they're so young.
They're very tough for them. I think we're just talking about ignorance here across the board. Whether it's racism, some of the horrible things I've heard said at football games, online, if you flick down any top player in the country, things that get said. It's a modern society issue. We're talking about reactionary stuff here. But the problem is the ignorance in the first place, which is very hard to deal with.
Okay. Yeah, and it needs to change worldwide, doesn't it? You know, the Rhian Brewster things that I was talking about was 2 Champions League games. So that comes under the umbrella of UEFA. You know, one game was in Moscow. You know, kick it out, of course, can't do anything in Moscow. So there needs to be a collaborative effort between football bodies worldwide because different countries react differently, don't they? And think it's normal in some places.
Yeah. And I think the punishment is a key thing as well. The punishments at the moment are laughable. Around Europe, especially, people can say and do things and know really not much is going to happen. You need to have punishments that make clubs, not just the players, clubs think, whoa, we better make sure our boys are intact.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also worth remembering when this sort of stuff is happening on social media, it's not just a football problem. This is a problem in society.
Oh, yeah, of course.
That sadly, in the week that the great Stuart Regis passed away, remains a problem, as it always has done. OK, plenty more to talk about after the break. We're going to be discussing players' wages. Are they earning too much, or do footballers deserve everything they get? This will be an interesting conversation, won't it? See you in a couple of moments. Written by Frank Lampard, but it's actually from Zach Young, and it is I Love Hazard, as does Frank, big fan of his. News coming in, Alexis Sanchez is having a medical tonight at Old Trafford ahead of that proposed move from Arsenal. It was only a few days ago on this very show you were making a good case for him to join Manchester City, so your reaction that he's chosen the red side of Manchester?
I'm delighted. Can't wait to see him get out on Old Trafford, and hopefully he can be the turning point in Manchester United's fortunes in terms of winning some silverware this season. I
wonder what the decisive factor was to choose United over City, Rio.
Money may have been a part of that.
I think it might have been. So the reported wage is £450,000 a week, which again brings players' wages into the spotlight.
Surely it has to be more than money, though.
He's going to Man United, man. It's not like he's going to China.
No, of course.
He was going to get paid.
I think the issue for a lot of people,
he's going to get paid
I think the issue for people is whether he gave his word to Manchester City before he decided to go to Manchester City.
I think that's the big
thing. That's more of a problem, isn't it? Don't you think?
That's City, but it is a good argument because it's not like he's turned down City to go to China like other players. He's gone to one of the biggest clubs, if not the biggest in the world, in Manchester United.
But he still made a decision that feels to a lot of football fans predominantly based on the money he's earning away.
Also, if you look at it the other way, of course money's involved, but it's more of a challenge. If he comes here as a great team that he kind of maybe fits in around all these players, here at Manchester United, there's no doubt that they need an uplift. They're 12 points behind. They need the uplift. He could be that man.
The thing is, if he wanted more money, he'd just stay at Arsenal for the next 3 months. So it can't just. I'd hate to think it's just financial reasons. There has to be mitigating circumstances about this deal, and hopefully it'll come out it'll come out in the next couple of months. But it can't just be financial.
Have we reached the point now, though, in football where players are simply earning too much money?
Throw that one straight to me.
Frank.
It's supply and demand, isn't it? Let's get it right. The TV deal, the latest one, changed everything. It changed the landscape. If clubs are willing to pay it, then that's it. You can't expect a player to turn it down. But I will say, if that you are at that top end of earning the money, you have a responsibility to really produce the goods. I'm completely behind Messi, Ronaldo, earn what you want because they really produce and they're worth every penny. But if you are talking about players that are maybe sitting on the bench or not really affecting things and winning things for their club and they're on stupid money, it's a slightly different argument.
Of the top 10 highest paid sports stars in the world, not a single one of them plays in the Premier League. Yeah. There's a lot of talk about footballers' wages. There's less talk about pop stars. There's less talk about movie stars. Yeah. If this club, if Manchester City are generating hundreds of millions of pounds from the TV deals, from the fans coming through here, from the sponsors, the reason for all that money coming into the game is the players, right? So isn't it right that the players are the ones that get that money? If not, it's just going to be siphoned off by hedge funds and CEOs and owners.
You're completely right, but at the same time, players don't set the rules and the benchmark for the prices. Like Frank said, it's the TV rights, the clubs are paying the players. But again, it strikes me that footballers always get hammered for this situation. Is it because it's a working class sport? Is it because a lot of the people come from backgrounds with not as much money, not less affluent backgrounds? Because I don't see golfers who earn huge money getting called out for the wages that they're earning. Motor racing drivers. These guys don't get called out for what they earn on a weekly or yearly basis. The difference is just, it baffles me a little bit. Yeah, listen, a nurse, a fireman, a policeman, they deserve to earn more money than any sportsman on the planet. But it's just that we're lucky that we were born into an industry that pays so well.
OK, lots of messages coming in from people at home. Ricky Main says, as much as I love football, what planet are you from thinking anyone deserves £450,000 a week for kicking a football around?
Yeah, but that's just an easy argument to say, isn't it?
What do you feel when you hear someone say that?
Well, I just think it's an easy argument to make. Everybody can say that. We all know that £450,000 a week is too much money. We know that, but that's just what it is to some footballers.
I think the mention of £450,000 a week has also collapsed our screens. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, screens are struggling to cope. Patrick says, should there be a salary cap for players under 21 in the UK? It wouldn't stop us attracting the best players in the world and would give young players more ambition. I can't help but think it would also encourage young players to move to lower league clubs to gain experience.
I agree with that. That's a very plausible...
What's going on here?
I think
it's not distracting at all. Just keep going. Just keep talking.
But with young players, what I was saying before, I think, was that they're producing the goods. So Sanchez at Manchester United, if it's a success, is the reason why Manchester United are a global success. Younger players need to develop, and then they earn their top money for me when they are producing at the top.
I don't think we mind the big players, the players who excite us, the players who score the goals. You know, as Frank mentioned, the Ronaldos, the Messis. You don't begrudge them anything because they're what we want to see. That's what we're paying our money for. It's the other players who maybe... don't try as hard.
Says, stars of the show, yes, but the majority of the Premier League and Championship players are anything but stars.
Possibly, I'd go along with a lot of that.
Yeah, but also, I think for young players, I think to protect the game and protect the young players, before you even make a first-team appearance, there's young players getting 25, 30 grand a week. Now, that's a problem because that affects their hunger to actually go out there and improve their game on a day-by-day basis, which we were always hungry to kind of get better, striving to get better contracts as kids, given small increments when we were younger. Well, now, before you kick a ball for the first team, you're almost a millionaire.
You don't need to play, do you? That's the sad thing.
That's the problem.
You can be rich and wealthy without even having to play the football, which is the problem, really.
Fine. OK, well, we're going to put in a phone call to Alexis Sanchez, see if we can borrow some of his 450 grand a week to buy some new screens.
Ask him to fix these screens.
You can spare 50 quid for a few new screens in our studio, can't it? They can't be any more expensive than that. Right, in the last part, we're going to talk about unfulfilled potential. Please get in touch right now. The players who played for your club that didn't quite match the mark. We'll get the thoughts of these three, and we'll get your thoughts as well. We'll see you in a second.